I'm Virginie O'Shea, founder of Firebrand Research, and I'm here to take you through the wonderful world of corporate actions in 5 minutes, if I can. So let's begin with defining what we're talking about here. A corporate action relates to an event within a corporation's life cycle. So this could be a dividend, it could be a stock split, it could be numerous other things related to redistributions or any type of reorganisation. Now they come in different flavours. There are lots of different subcategories of corporate action and they can be relatively complex, but the basic distinction between the different types is whether they're mandatory or voluntary for shareholders to take some sort of action on, and whether there are elections for the end shareholder to actually participate within. So turning to that, obviously any kind of corporate event will impact the pricing of any kind of instruments that's related to that corporate, be it shares or bonds that are related to that corporate. So every financial institution needs to pay attention to what's going on within the corporate actions environment. It's obviously a relatively complicated process, but there are basically some steps that I'm going to talk you through here. So it all starts with an event announcement, and that's when the corporate announces what's going to happen. It'll provide some dates by which elections must be made if elections are going to happen, and it will also provide an end date by when everything will be completed. So the basic information there needs to be captured, it needs to be created into an event record. So you may have to go to various different sources for events information. There's no standardized feed, so data vendors go out and they'll source some of this information. You may go directly to an exchange, or you may go directly to a CSD to be able to source this information, and you may go back directly to a custodian. So all of these different sources need to be reconciled against each other, and then a golden copy is produced so that you have a record of that event that you can pass down the intermediary chain down to your end shareholder, your ultimate beneficial owner. Then there are any elections and from the shareholder perspective need to be confirmed and inputted into the system. You need to look at any entitlements the shareholders have. You need to take into account tax and calculate those taxes. You also need to process claims and instructions. Everything impacts portfolios, and you have to look at the receivables end of this. So the accounting process needs to be impacted by this. And at the end of it, you may have payments and settlements that need to happen at the end of the event. So all of this goes together, and it's a relatively difficult process for the industry. So there are numerous pain points, and I'm going to touch on a few here. There's a lot of conflict between front office and post-trade functions when it comes to this data. Front office want it yesterday, whereas post-trade are more worried about the accuracy of the record itself. So it may take some days to put together. So there's some tension between there. Obviously, I said you have to create composite records from multiple sources. It's not an easy process. They can have significant impacts on multiple functions. Think about collateral management. If you're holding assets, you have to reprice them. You have to look at the ones that are out on loan. You have to understand that from the securities lending perspective. There are multiple sources of data. They may conflict with each other. You need to reconcile that, decide which will be inputted into the composite record. And corporate actions, unfortunately, the volumes have been rising over the last couple of decades. So we're seeing a huge increase in the number of events per year. And they have peak months. So around about April through to actually often May and sometimes June, you have a lot of the activities going on. And key person risk is very high in this space. It's relatively few people out there that understand the market. Now, there are different perspectives. So the issuer has a priority. It focuses on legal obligations. They focus on what they have to do for corporate law. They may not be very happy about the records being changed as they go through the process. They are happy with their original documentation. And think about all the different corporates out there. They aren't the same. Corporations vary in size. They vary in priority. You can have McDonald's through to a tiny firm that is listed. So there's not a degree of harmonization across the issuers. Now, the buy-side viewpoint, obviously asset managers spend a lot of time manually checking this information. They may not rely or feel strong reliance on custodians. They have a poor view of that data because it's often not non-standard from their perspective. and corporate actions are being dealt with the investment operations teams within these asset managers and institutional asset owners, and it's a relatively manually intensive function, so it's quite hard work during those peak months. Within banks and brokers, there's a deep sense of frustration. I think many of these banks have been dealing with the same problems for a really long time. There's been continued underinvestment. This is a cost of doing business. It's not really something that's revenue generating within this realm. So it's quite manual. There's a lot of repetitive processes. There's a lot of brain draining from the staff members moving to other functions. And technology can be decades old. So this isn't the most fun within a bank or broker. Now, when people are trying to purchase technology in this space, the tipping point tends to be around a rise and increase in volume that you can't cope with, that tips you into having to automate some of the process. And this is the community of people that get involved in making decisions. And if you've got lots of committees involved, then it can be quite a slow process because, as I said, it's not necessarily an easy process to automate. So, the point of all of my work is how mature is your firm's approach to corporate actions. So how is Firebrand Research attempting to help anyone in corporate actions? Well, I've designed a digital maturity spectrum that ranks individual firms, as if you take our 5-minute assessment, and you'll get an instant ranking in terms of these 5 different stages, from incipient at the bottom there through to being a trailblazer at the top. We'll take into account the various aspects of your corporate actions environment and see where you rank. I'm aiming to make our research as accessible as possible, so please do get in touch. My contact details are at the bottom here, and I look forward to speaking to you in the future.